Well, it was when I was asked to become a member of the committee for this museum. I, of course, live in New York City and was designated the United States representative of the International Committee. And I immediately got in touch with those artists that I felt were really significant and would bring prestige to your museum here. And as I wrote to Mario, they weren't always that enthusiastic to give something away, a good one, and I wouldn't accept minor things. I always made sure I saw what it was. So much of what's here today in this Museo de Solidaridad that I sent was of high quality. I was careful about that. The International Committee, which was very distinguished, Mario chose very well. And as you know, Mario Pedrosa was highly regarded by everyone for many reasons. So the International Committee were all major figures, like the director of the Museum of Modern Art in Paris and so on. And I was the North American representative. My personal interests would, of course, have guided my requests, but I also bore in mind that this was, as Mario made very clear, it was to be non-sectarian, that my personal prejudices mustn't enter. And I tried very hard to do that. On the other hand, the artists that we regarded in the United States as major artists were almost all abstract artists. So I did choose abstract artists that you have hanging here today. I'd say on the whole, most of the painters and sculptors that I knew very little about Allende and the revolution. And they weren't that enthusiastic about donating, giving free a work of art to a museum in Chile. So I confess, I put pressure on them. As I said, I twisted their arm. And it was a little hard for them to say no to me because I was, at the time, a quite well-known so-called art critic, and it wasn't good to make me an enemy. So it was a very delicate project. Oh, for me, it was a great accomplishment that I was very grateful to Mario Pedrosa for including me and for being part of the first ever museum of abstract art, or art that was difficult for El Pueblo. That he would, as Mario Pedrosa always said, and he proved it, I think, from what I read, that I believe the first exhibition of the works that we gathered for this museum was for the copper miners in the north. And in my experience since then, too, if you approach working class people who know nothing about abstract art and so on, in the right way, it's nothing difficult. They accept it. But usually it's not approached, certainly not in my country, that way. Most of the artists that I sent were in sympathy with the idea of a free museum for everyone, which would show what we called progressive art. In other words, art that most of the working class would find difficult. But if you present it, if you respect, our view was, if you're very respectful to the workers and make them welcome and don't charge them a fee to come in, they usually are quite cooperative. They want to learn. That was my experience, and that I was told was true here, right? What is my impression about the Museo de Solidaridad now, looking back? Well, it's still the only, unfortunately, it's still the only example of a museum which is made by and for the people, and amongst whom I include artists. And so in a way, it's unique, which is good for you, but not good for the world, because we meant it to be a prototype, and that they would be all over the world. There would be Museo de Solidaridad, and that the artists would no longer be a captive of the capitalist system and of those merchants, the art dealers, and of the wealthy people that bought them. And in my experience anyway, most painters and sculptors, and also people who do larger things like Alfredo Har, do not want to be captive to the capitalist system. They really are not that happy to be hanging in very rich men's houses, and they would rather be in a museum like this, which is for everyone. But as far as I know, this is still unique, right?